Hello. This video started with a completely different concept. I was planning on reading pregnancy horrors just in time for Halloween and then posting the video on November 2nd because I thought that was kind of funny. So I started with the classic, Rosemary's Baby. I loved it. Then I moved on to Delicate Condition by Danielle Valentine. This is a book that thinks that it can do Rosemary's Baby better than Rosemary's Baby, and it pissed me off so bad it has derailed the entire video. And now we're talking about authors who think that they can do a better job than the classic, than the blueprint, than the original, okay? So I'm going to start with telling you about Rosemary's Baby. I'm going to start with praising it a lot. Then we're going to talk about the absolutely insufferable piece of shit that was Delicate Condition by Danielle Valentine. And then we're going to talk about the kind of middling book that was Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. And then I'm going to talk to you about what I think makes a retelling work or fail. And I'm going to draw some really strong conclusions based off of a very small sample size. And that's going to be the video. I hope you enjoy. I'm going to let me from a couple days ago tell you about Rosemary's Baby. I have finished Rosemary's Baby, and it did not disappoint me. I absolutely loved The Stepford Wives, and this exceeded my expectations. I did, however, read it immediately after reading Ice Planet Barbarians, so I think that colored my experience with this book in a more favorable way. This was everything Ice Planet Barbarians was not. But there is a reason that this book has held up over time as like a pillar of horror fiction. It's good. It's just a good book. This is going to be a long summary because even though this book is just over 200 pages, everything in it is so very deliberate and important. So if you don't want spoilers for Rosemary's Baby, if you had somehow avoided them like I had, skip this part. The book begins with introducing us to Rosemary and Guy. They're this young couple living in New York City, and they're looking for an apartment where they hope, at least Rosemary hopes, to raise their future children. Guy's a little bit more tentative about the whole family thing. He does want it, but a lot less than Rosemary, and he wants to put it off until after his acting career has taken off. They get a call that an apartment in the Bramford, this old, famous, luxurious building in town, has opened up. They've been trying to get in here for years. They've been on this wait list. And now they've finally given up and signed a lease somewhere else. But they go to the tour anyway. At this tour, we get to see their relationship dynamic. And I found them to be so charming. And I knew damn well that Guy was going to end up betraying Rosemary. That's what Levin did in The Stepford Wives as well. But this time, their relationship was even more sweet and funny and realistic and lovable. Just a couple pages into the book, they're doing this tour with the building manager, Mr. Miklas. And they're in the elevator heading up to the 7th floor where they'll end up taking this apartment. And they're talking about Guy's acting career. And Mr. Miklas is trying to be nice. He's saying, like, the money's in commercials. And Guy says, yeah, that's where the artistic thrill is, too. And then it says, Rosemary gave him a pleading look. He gave back one of stunned innocence and then made a leering vampire face at the top of Mr. Miklas's head. Is that not such an effective way of establishing these characters? I feel like that one little paragraph sold them and their dynamic to me. It feels very human, very real, and it has made me love them and care about their relationship just a few pages into the book. This apartment is gorgeous and big and exactly what they're looking for. The older woman who had lived here before had fallen into a coma and died not long after, and they noticed that she had pushed her armoire up against a closet in the hallway. And when they move it to the side, it is just a regular closet. It has a vacuum cleaner and towels. And Mr. Miklas says, you know, she was probably getting a little bit loopy in her old age. But Rosemary thinks, why would she block herself off from her vacuum cleaner and her towels? And this small thing doesn't stop their excitement about the apartment. They manage to pull out of the lease that they had just signed, and they get this place at the Bramford. And this feels special. It feels a little bit elite. Everybody knows this building, and all of her friends are jealous of her, except this old friend of hers, Hutch. Hutch and Rosemary also have a lovely dynamic. He lived next door to her when she first moved to New York City as this like bright-eyed, naive 20-year-old from a family in Omaha who wanted little to do with her because she didn't follow in their Catholic tradition. Hutch rejected the father figure role, but he did become kind of a mentor and friend to Rosemary and the women that she was living with, and they have stayed very close over the years. He's intelligent and funny, and he obviously cares about Rosemary a lot and wants the best for her, and he doesn't think that moving into the Bramford is the best for her. Hutch has lived in New York City a lot longer than Rosemary has, and he has seen the bad news that follows the Bramford. At dinner, he tells Guy and Rosemary about all of the different evil people who have lived in this building. These twin sisters who cannibalize young children, a famous Satanist. He says a few years before this conversation, a dead infant was found in the basement. They kind of fight against him, and he gets a little bit worked up, and then he ends up saying, you know what, this is silly. Forget I said anything. I'm a fool. I understand why you're happy to move in here. I wasn't trying to scare you. I just had a bad feeling about it, but I'll support whatever you do. I'll get you a nice lock for your door. Of course, they don't heed his warning. They move into this beautiful home, and Rosemary really begins dreaming of starting their family and decorating that second bedroom as a nursery. And in this stage of their life now, they're busy and they're meeting their new neighbors, and Guy's working hard to make a break in the acting world, and Rosemary's seeing friends and decorating the apartment, and life is good like it always is in the beginning of a horror story. The only time that Hutch's warnings ever pop into Rosemary's head during this kind of like honeymoon period is when she has to go down to the creepy basement to do laundry. But fortunately, after a few times of being scared down there thinking about the dead infant that was found recently, she meets a woman her age who's also scared down there, and they hit it off. This woman is Terry, and she's living with the neighbors whose apartment butts up against the back of Rosemary and Guy's, the Castevets. I haven't watched the movie, that definitely could be the wrong pronunciation. Rosemary and Guy haven't met these neighbors yet, but they can hear them through the walls. They're often like having parties and singing off tune alongside a flute or a clarinet or something like that. Terry opens up to Rosemary, and she tells her that she was addicted to drugs and living on the streets when these neighbors, named Minnie and Roman, took her in and cleaned her up, and she's so grateful to them. And she even shows Rosemary this good luck charm necklace that Minnie had given her. It's like this little metal cage filled with something called tannis root, meant to bring good fortune, and it stinks something fierce. Rosemary and Terry agree with each other that the basement is creepy, and they decide that they'll go down together to do their laundry from then on. But just a little while later, Rosemary and Guy are returning from watching a play in the city when they see a crowd and cop cars gathered outside the front of their building. And Terry's body is there, lying dead on the sidewalk, having jumped from the 7th floor. Rosemary tells the police the little that she knows about Terry, that she was living with the Castevets, but that Rosemary herself hasn't met them, and then they come waltzing around the corner, this older couple. Rosemary is very distraught, of course, at seeing this dead body, this woman that she didn't know very well, but that she had liked. And she tells Minnie and Roman that Terry had really appreciated them and had spoken very highly of the two of them. A couple days later, Minnie shows up at her door to thank Rosemary for telling her how Terry felt, that was an act of kindness in this moment of shock and distress and grief. So Rosemary invites her in, and Minnie is this sort of like tactless older woman who full on asks her how much pieces of their furniture cost, but she's kind of self-aware about it and almost charming. She is definitely a lot, and you can feel that she's a lot. She is a character, but she has something going on. She's got something to her that kind of makes you feel like you like her, at the same time as being baffled by her instantly overbearing manner. Minnie invites Guy and Rosemary over for dinner, but when Guy gets home that night, he's kind of in a rank mood because this other actor, Donald Baumgart, who he's often up against for roles, is going to get the part in a play that Guy really wants. And once again, this feels like a very realistic and well-written conversation between the two of them. This argument where they're not really communicating, but Rosemary is clearly kind of upset that he said no, and he senses that, and he's like, fine, we can go. And she can tell that he's only saying that because he knows that she wants to, so she's like, no, don't worry about it, it's fine. And then he can only convince her to go by lifting his bad mood and making a joke. Who in the world has not had a conversation like that? They go to dinner, they're friendly and funny and kind, and the Castevets, again, are just like a little bit much. Nothing totally egregious. They're just older people who are a little overbearing and a lot to deal with. Rosemary's like mildly off-put by them, but she keeps up her facade during the dinner, but it seems like Guy is really liking them until the two of them are finally heading back to their own apartment, and they hear the Castevets' door close behind them, and Guy immediately starts in on this impression of Minnie's Midwestern accent. And they run back to their own place, giggling and hushing each other, and they get to their own door, and it says, laughing, Rosemary cringed and hushed him, and they ran hand in hand on ultra-quiet tiptoes to their own door, which they unlocked, opened, slammed, locked, bolted, chained, and Guy nailed it over with imaginary beams, pushed up 3 imaginary boulders, hoisted an imaginary drawbridge, and mopped his brow and panted while Rosemary bent over double and laughed into both hands. I just love them, and I know that he's going to betray her. Not even in hindsight, I knew it then, and yet I could not help but love them and love their relationship. And it isn't a perfect relationship. Guy can be grumpy, he can withdraw, they want different things sometimes, they don't always treat each other perfectly. It feels like such a realistic depiction of two people who are comfortably in love with each other, and I cannot help myself but be charmed by it. That night, Rosemary gets her period, and she's upset because she really wants a baby. And this is an example of her not always behaving the best. She has been tricking Guy into giving her a baby, initiating sex on the right nights, only pretending to take her birth control, and she thinks of her getting her period as her losing and him winning. Despite his dramatics after leaving the Castevets the night before, Guy goes over again the next night to hear some of Roman's stories because his dad worked in Hollywood, and Guy obviously has these really big dreams that take over most of his life. And Rosemary isn't really up for company that night, so she doesn't come along, but Minnie just shows up at Rosemary's place unannounced with another woman from the building, Laura Louise, and they absolutely are imposing on her, but Rosemary thinks, like, even though I kind of wanted to be alone tonight, I don't really mind hanging out with them. It's actually quite nice nice to just sit around with these women and work on our little fiber arts. And Minnie has brought her a gift as well. It's that necklace that was filled with tannis root that Terry had been wearing, and it is still stinking up a storm. Guy says that he had a good evening talking to Roman, but that night, Rosemary wakes up in the middle of the night and she finds him sitting up in bed beside her smoking a cigarette, and he tells her that it's just insomnia. A couple days later, he comes home with 2 tickets to a play gifted to him by his vocal coach, and he tells her to take a friend as he's already seen it. He'll stay home and work on a scene on his own. When she gets back from this play, the smell of the necklace that Minnie gave her has permeated through the apartment, absolutely reeking enough that Rosemary wraps it up in tinfoil and puts it in a box. But she is more focused on Guy, who is no longer withdrawn like he has been because of his career woes. He's now vivacious after getting the scene that he was practicing down. That weekend, he spends most of the days doing little home projects and keeping an ear out for the phone, which at one point rings with both good and bad news. The bad news is that Donald Baumgart, his competitor, has woken up blind and they cannot figure out what's going on. And the good news is that that means that the role he was set to take is now being offered to Guy. It's like his big break. This really turns it all around for Guy, and he realizes that he's been acting like kind of a dick and focusing so much on himself, and he gets her flowers and he says, let's have a baby. And this really is the final piece to perfect Rosemary's life. She walks with a new pep in her step. She wants to be seen out and about. She already has the glow of a pregnant woman before it's even happened. Weirdly, she gets a call one day from her older sister. She only really has a relationship with one of her brothers because her family, like I said, wants nothing to do with her and her non-Catholic husband. So this is a little bit strange. Her sister just tells her that she's been having this overwhelming feeling that something bad has happened to Rosemary. She's relieved to hear Rosemary's voice, and she asks that night Rosemary stay in just to be safe. But Rosemary was already planning on staying in because her and Guy are going to do the nasty and they're going to try to make a baby this night. But then right after dinner, Minnie shows up at the door and Guy goes to get it while Rosemary sits there and is like praying to God, the God she no longer believes in, that Minnie is not invited into the house so that her and Guy can have their romantic night. And Minnie isn't. She's just there to bring over some desserts. Desserts that they happily accept because Guy forgot to pick up dessert on his way home like he had promised he was going to. Minnie's cooking when they went over for dinner that one time was absolutely awful. The mousse that she's brought over, which she calls mouse, is also not that good, and Rosemary doesn't like it, and when she expresses that it has this like chalky undertaste, Guy gets weirdly angry at her. He's like very strange and moody about it. He's telling her that she's so rude not to eat this dessert, to accept that necklace and then not wear it in the privacy of her own home. He's saying that this is such a disrespectful thing to do. So she kind of asks him to go flip the record, and when he turns his back, she scoops the mousse or mouse up into her napkin, and then she does a few performative bites for him once he turns around. We all know that Rosemary has been poisoned by Minnie, and that Guy is somehow involved in this. Why was he acting like that? It doesn't make any sense, and I don't think that there's any world in which we're not supposed to pick up on this. Of course, she gets dizzy and drowsy, and they blame it on the alcohol, and Guy takes her to bed, and she's drifting in and out of consciousness while he is undressing her. And then she has this very intense dream. This dream involves seeing the wallpaper in that hall closet that the previous tenant had walled off, then being surrounded by naked people, including Minnie and Roman and Guy, doing some strange ritual where they're painting on her body with what looks like blood. And then also the president is there, and then also she's certain that she's been bitten by a mouse. It's a very good dream sequence, a healthy mix of a drugged, unconscious mind's strange imaginings, and then also parts that you're certain are really happening to her. Like Minnie telling Guy that as long as Rosemary ate the dessert, she can't see or hear anything. Near the end of the dream, Guy is having sex with her while she's looking into his yellow furnace eyes. And the very end is that the Pope tells her that she is forgiven. And then she wakes up the next morning and she is covered in scratches all over her body. And Guy kind of sheepishly tells her that he didn't want to miss out on baby making night, so he just did it anyway while she was asleep. And of course, Rosemary is upset. She has been assaulted. I think this is something that I really like about Ira Levin, which is his very human and compassionate understanding of issues like this. Today, we all see this and we all understand this to be wrong, to be the assault that it is. But when this book was written and set, this was legal in every single state. And of course, that doesn't mean people didn't think it was wrong, and this book proves that. It's not like all people from 60 years ago were stupid or so unlike who we are today. But it does mean that something that we today would easily write off as wrong and call it what it is depicted differently. This book wants us to know how Rosemary feels, how it was such a violation to have her husband have sex with her mindless body instead of the full person that she is. She feels really distant from Guy, and she asks Hutch if she can go stay in his cabin alone for a couple of days. And the first couple days, she refuses to think about him. And then she gets really sad and lonely, and she decides that she just needs to go talk to him. She kind of convinces herself that she has been overreacting, but deep down I think she still knows she's been violated. And when she gets home, they don't really talk about what Guy did, but they do kind of kiss and make up without really saying anything. And then the two of them realize that Rosemary is 2 days late for her period. She goes to an obstetrician and he confirms that she is pregnant. She's excited enough that it clouds her feelings about her child's conception being something that was done to her without her involvement or consent. Upon hearing the news, Guy is immediately like, we need to tell Minnie and Roman. They've been so excited about it, and with people that old, who knows if they'll even be around for the birth. And Rosemary in this moment loves him, and she loves the world because she is finally having the baby that she so desperately wants, and she thinks, I hadn't realized how important Minnie and Roman had become to him. I'm going to think of them more kindly from now on. Minnie and Roman immediately come over to celebrate, and they insist that she see their friend, one of the most sought-after famous obstetricians in the whole country, Dr. Saperstein, and they set up an appointment with him right then and there. When Rosemary goes to bed that night, she feels a little bit vulnerable and scared, now so acutely aware of all of the dangers in the world and how they could harm her baby. So she goes to the drawer and she pulls out that good luck charm necklace and she puts it on, and that is where part 1 ends. In part 2, Rosemary feels alive. She loves her new doctor, Dr. Saperstein. He tells her that he's going to get Minnie to use the herbs that she grows in her kitchen to make a fresh vitamin drink every morning to keep her and the baby healthy. And of course, you read this and you're like, girl, don't fucking drink that. But she does. And she quickly develops this alarming and sharp pain in her abdomen that does not stop no matter what she does. Dr. Saperstein doesn't seem all that worried about it. He tells her that it's common enough for women who have stiff joints. And he reiterates again and again that she shouldn't talk to her friends about their pregnancies because they'll fearmonger her. They'll make her think that something is wrong. But every pregnancy is different and stress is bad for the baby. He's trying to isolate her. The pain itself, though, is isolating enough. Rosemary is forced to shut herself into her apartment and try to just rest, even though nothing brings her any relief. And this goes on for months and months. She's losing weight and she's getting more and more sick. Hutch comes by to visit one day and he is shocked by her appearance, and he's kind of questioning her doctor for not investigating this further. But then very quickly, Roman shows up, looking a little bit winded. He asks Rosemary if she needs anything from the shops because Minnie's going down to pick stuff up. And then he just kind of like stands there expectantly waiting for her to invite him in and introduce him to Hutch. So she does. And Hutch is worried about her, and even in front of Roman is questioning her doctor and questioning the drink that Minnie makes each morning and what's in it and what tannis root is. And he says he's going to go home and research it because he's never heard of it. And then Roman is kind of like delicately insisting the same things that Rosemary has been saying, that it's normal to lose some weight in the first couple months of pregnancy, that she'll gain loads of it later on, that having stiff joints is a common problem for pregnant women. Roman then leaves, and not long later, Guy shows up, and he's weirdly still wearing his stage makeup, and he's kind of like breathless and excited, but not about anything in particular. And then when Hutch leaves, Hutch can't find his glove. Later that night, Hutch calls and he asks to meet Rosemary the next morning to talk about something important, and you're like, oh God, oh fuck, something is going to happen to Hutch. And of course it does. He doesn't show up to their meeting, and she finds out it's because he has fell into a fucking coma. But understandably, Rosemary is so preoccupied by this constant, all-encompassing pain that she doesn't really have the space to spend too much time worrying after Hutch. She also has very little control. The doctors don't know what's going on. So she mourns his presence and she's worried for him, but she isn't able to allow that to take up a forefront spot in her mind. Instead, she's just trying to live day to day and go through the motions. She sees one of her friends who comments on how strange it is that Dr. Saperstein is seeing her weekly. She says that she also saw Dr. Saperstein, and he only saw her weekly in the very last bit of her pregnancy. And Rosemary's like, oh my God, there's something wrong and no one's telling me. So she confronts him about this. And again, he's like, you need to stop talking to your friends. Stop reading things. Every pregnancy is different. And Guy is trying to convince her to listen to him. Though the pain hasn't stopped, Rosemary decides to try and take her life back by throwing a Christmas party. One without Minnie or Roman or Laura Louise, the only people that they've really been seeing since the pain started. This is going to be her friends and the people that she loves. It all goes well with her friends, but the pain is still there, and they notice that there is something wrong with her, that she is very unwell. And some of the women corner her in the kitchen, and she starts crying all of these pent-up tears about this pain that won't stop and that she cannot learn to live with. Guy tries to come in, they shoo him out, they say ladies only, and they convince her that this isn't right. They give her this power by seeing her and recognizing that she isn't okay, and it convinces her to stand up for herself to try to get a second opinion. Once everyone is gone that night, Rosemary tells Guy that she's going to see a different doctor, that first one, Dr. Hill. The next morning, Guy completely flips. He says, your friends are bitches who are trying to scare you. Now you're like, okay, this is the worst man in the world. I fucking hate his guts. And it turns into this back and forth of a kind that happens many times in this book, where one party is lying to Rosemary and wants her to act in a certain way or do a certain thing, like eating that drugged moose that Guy got really weird about. He doesn't want her to see Dr. Hill, so he goes on and on about respect and how it isn't respectful, and she needs to at least tell Dr. Saperstein that she wants a second opinion before seeing someone else. They're getting into this argument, and it's building and building, and then the pain just stops. It's gone. It says it's like a horn that finally stops. It's important to say here that Rosemary has not been drinking Minnie's morning smoothie. She's been pouring it down the sink. And this morning, she made her own smoothie. There's a horrifying moment where the relief turns to fear because she has associated this pain with the baby, and she thinks that her smoothie or her lack of drinking Minnie's smoothie has killed the baby, and that's why the pain has stopped. And then she feels it kick. And I mean, all is right in the world. Guy, though, isn't all that excited about the baby kicking. He kind of like abruptly pulls his hand away once he feels it. And the chapter ends with Rosemary talking out loud about how excited she is with no response from him. And it turns from her talking to him and not getting anything in return to her talking to the baby. It's just like a little bit unsettling, like a lot of this book is, because a lot of this book is build up. Levin, I think, has totally mastered a creeping sense of dread and unease. So everything turns around. Life is better now than it was bad before. Guy's play is terrible, but he ends up getting rave reviews for his performance, and his career is finally taking off. And Rosemary herself is alive again. Her pregnancy has no longer stolen everything from her. But then Hutch dies, and at his funeral, the woman that he was seeing tells Rosemary that he woke up right before he died, and he begged and begged the nurse repeatedly to give this book to Rosemary and to tell her the name is an anagram. He made the nurse repeat it back to him. It was so important in his final moments. And now she has this book, and you're like, okay, this is where it is all going to unravel. Hutch saves her from beyond the grave. Of course he does. Rosemary gets home, and Minnie is at the door with the smoothie that she still brings over every day, and she takes the package with the book from Rosemary so that Rosemary has a free hand to drink this smoothie. And you're like, holy fucking shit, get that away from her. Don't let her touch that. You know it's so important. But Rosemary, she doesn't process this, but Levin knows that what you're thinking is that Minnie needs to step the fuck back from the book. And Rosemary just kind of doesn't want to get into the whole explanation of what the book is, so she takes it back and says, oh, it's just a gift from a friend. And now she has it in her possession, and Minnie is gone. And it is a massive breath of relief when Rosemary shuts the door behind Minnie. And I like that it's a relief that you feel, but she doesn't yet. She opens up this book, and it's called All of Them Witches. She flips through it, and she reads through the parts that Hutch had underlined, and then she busts out the Scrabble tiles to try and figure out what this title could be anagrammed into, but she can't really get anywhere with it. She flips back through the book and she finds the page on that famous Satanist that Hutch had warned them about, Adrian Marcato, and Hutch had underlined a lot of this page, and this page mentions the Bramford, and it also mentions Marcato's son, Stephen, and it only takes Rosemary a moment to realize that Stephen Marcato is an anagram of Roman Castevet. Roman is the son of this famous Satanist. However, unlike you as the reader, Rosemary has not realized that Guy is in on this. So when he gets home from work that night, she shares her findings with him. And he, of course, is like, you're freaking yourself out, put the book away, and he won't take no for an answer on this. He demands that she give him this book, and it's like he makes the rules and she's a child. And this, I think, is one of the strongest points of this book, how great of a job it does showing how little autonomy pregnant women have, like this near infantilization where the people around you can decide what you're doing is not what's best for the baby, and then they can choose for you what is the right thing. It is so good. Truly the social horror of being pregnant. Guy tells her that even if this is true, Roman changing his name proves that he's not like his father. And Rosemary's like, okay, but he didn't change it. He anagrammed it. So she takes her suspicions to Dr. Saperstein. And you're like, girl, they're all in on it. He is Minnie and Roman's friend. Get out of there. But it also isn't necessarily frustrating. I think that you can understand her inherent desire to trust people. She is also at this point extremely pregnant, so both socially and physically vulnerable. Saperstein does a great job at making her feel safe, at believing her suspicions, and telling her that he'll get her some regular vitamins so that she doesn't have to keep taking Minnie's smoothie every morning. He also tells her that Minnie and Roman have been thinking of traveling to Europe because Roman is sick and he doesn't have much time left, but they didn't want to leave so close to Rosemary's due date, and he says he'll let them know that Rosemary is fine with them going, that she'll be okay on her own, and she's relieved. Before they leave, Minnie does end up asking Rosemary if she's found out who Roman's father is, and Rosemary says yes, she's shocked that Minnie knows she knows. And Minnie says, I could tell that you knew. You got cold with us. Don't worry about it. I would act the same way. This is why Roman likes traveling. He doesn't like staying in one place for very long because someone always finds out and treats him differently. Minnie and Roman then leave for Europe and there's a going away party, and Rosemary feels this last minute kind of wave of affection for them and isn't as happy that they're leaving as she expected herself to be, having built them up as these evil people in her head, but then seeing the reality of them as actually quite nice and caring. Rosemary now tries to focus on the baby. She's buying all the supplies, it's getting really close to her due date, and she runs into Guy's old vocal coach, Dominic, and she thanks him for the tickets to that play that she went to with her friend way back when in the book. And he's like, I didn't gift you tickets to a play. And she walks away from this conversation so confused. She thinks back to this book that Hutch gifted her, which, by the way, Guy ended up throwing away without telling her. Oh my fucking God. She thinks about how it detailed anointing ceremonies for new cult members, how energized Guy was when she got home from this play, how the whole house smelled like tannis root. Any other reason that he could have wanted her out that she tries to talk herself through falls flat under any scrutiny. And before she can even ask herself why he might do this, what he would want from a group of Satanists, the answer comes to her. Donald Baumgart, his competitor, who was blinded just a couple of days later. A couple of days of Guy waiting at the phone for the news of that. She's like walking around downtown at this point, just thinking about this and convincing herself that she's going crazy. And it isn't until the Donald Baumgart thought that she starts questioning what she believes. Like, if the Satanists can actually do things. Before she was telling Guy, like, of course, witchcraft isn't real, but the danger is that they believe that it's real. And now she's kind of questioning, maybe they could have made Donald Baumgart go blind. And then she stops in her tracks and out loud, she whispers to herself, Hutch? Which is like absolutely fucking heartbreaking. Holy shit. She remembers the night before Hutch fell into a coma when he called and asked to meet her the next day, how Guy had left the house for ice cream, and she looked out the window watching for him, but he never came out. So she thought he must have taken the back exit. But now she realizes that he was going over to Minnie and Roman's house. Roman, who knew that Hutch was suspicious, who called Guy home from work, which is why he showed up winded and still in his makeup. She then thinks about how that night when Hutch was leaving, he couldn't find his glove, and how the Satanists need a personal item to perform a ritual. And she realizes that it could not have been Roman who took the glove. She walked him to and from the front door. It was Guy. And then she comes to understand what Guy was planning on trading for his career success. The baby. The baby that he hadn't shown any interest in, that he had actually turned away from, that he didn't want to feel kicking, that he didn't want to talk about. She goes home and she can't decide if she's gone mad or gone sane. She calls Donald Baumgart's phone and she manages to casually get him to tell her that a couple of days before he went blind, when he and Guy had met up for drinks to celebrate him getting the part, they had traded ties. And this is all Rosemary needs to know. Guy had an item of Donald's. So she packs a suitcase and she heads to Dr. Saperstein, who she's going to ask to put her up in the hospital for the next couple of days until the baby comes. But in the waiting room, the receptionist comments on her new perfume. And she's like, it's a big improvement from what you were wearing before, if you don't mind me saying. Meaning the tannis root charm. The receptionist says, yeah, Dr. Saperstein sometimes has the same scent on him and I can't even be in the same room as him. And Rosemary gets up and she books it out of there. She goes to a phone booth and she calls Dr. Hill, the first doctor that she had seen, and she begs him to see her, and he finally reluctantly relents. She shows up and he listens to all of her concerns. He tells her that they'll book her into the hospital, that he would be freaked out if he was in her shoes, and he tells her to go lie down, and she falls asleep. And when she wakes up, Guy and Dr. Saperstein are there. Literally everyone is either in on it or does not trust her enough to not give her back to the people who are in on it. Dr. Hill, I don't think, is a full-on Satanist, but he sees a scared pregnant woman and he thinks she must be wrong. And he takes the men's side. So Guy and Dr. Saperstein lead her home in a daze. She sits between them in the back of a taxi, and it's so vivid, just that one line. She manages to pull a little stunt that gets her in the door of the apartment with the chain locked, but she can't get a hold of anyone that she tries to call for help. And then somehow Guy and Dr. Saperstein are in the room, and she starts having contractions. And then all of Minnie's friends from around the building show up, and Rosemary is put under sedation, and when she wakes up, they tell her that the baby didn't make it. For days, she's in a haze, and she's under constant surveillance. They try to tell her that it was just a bit of prepartum psychosis that she was going through, but she thinks that she can hear the baby crying through the wall in Minnie and Roman's supposedly empty apartment. They're giving her pills every day, and she starts only pretending to take them, hiding them under the mattress. They're sedatives, so she gets a lot more clear-headed. And one day, she sneaks those pills into the tea that Leah, one of Minnie and Roman's friends who's watching over her, is drinking. And when she conks out, Rosemary thinks back to that dream that she had in the beginning of the story, the night that Guy assaulted her, and she opens the closet, and she realizes that the back wall of it is actually a door that leads to Minnie and Roman's apartment. And she goes in there, and everyone is there. Minnie and Roman, who are meant to be in Europe. Guy is there. They're all sitting around talking and drinking and laughing. And there is a bassinet covered in black taffeta. There's an upside down cross. Everyone here is fucking Satanists. She takes a deep breath, and she steps into view of the room holding this giant knife. And for a moment, nobody notices her. And then they do. And she starts screaming and threatening them. And they all stay very calm. And Roman tells her, why don't you go look at the baby? The baby that she thought was dead is alive. Except when he opens his eyes, they're entirely yellow. Except for these two little slits for the pupils. They tell her that he has little nubs where his horns will grow and claws and a tail. The baby is a little devil. Satan is the baby's father. And then everybody starts chanting, Hail Satan. A visitor comes in. They start talking about how it was predicted 300 years ago that the devil would be reborn on June 25th. And Rosemary's kind of standing off to the side in shock. But she's watching Laura Louise rocking the baby too fast. And the baby's kind of protesting, and Laura Louise isn't really paying attention. And so she angrily goes over to correct her, and she starts rocking the baby herself. And she turns from planning to throw this baby out the window and follow after him to starting to warm up to him. The book ends with her putting her foot down that his name is Andrew, not Adrian. And though Roman seems certainly like the leader here and is the one pushing back against her, everyone does take her side on this. Maybe the ending wraps up a little neatly, but I'm okay with that. I mean, what else is Rosemary going to do? This whole book has shown how much they have tried to isolate her. She doesn't have a choice but to somewhat conform to what they're doing. Some people say that this is her maternal instinct winning over, but I think it's more to do with them having broken her down. I think that this is just about a perfect book. There's certainly some race stuff that is either straight up mean-spirited or bigoted, or it just hasn't aged well, but narratively, this is everything that you could want from a psychological thriller. It has these exceptionally well-developed characters that are so vivid, they evoke feelings in you every single page. You cannot help but care about them, whether you love them or hate them or feel frustrated by them. They're all displayed so well in their dialogue that is a joy to read. This book is very dialogue heavy. Sometimes it can be a little bit playful. It has a sense of humor. It's definitely of its time, but in such a charming way, it never feels hard to understand what they're saying to each other like older books can sometimes feel. The writing is so good. Just like the Stepford Wives, not a word is wasted. The tone is set immediately. The characters are established. Everything that's said builds on these things and creates a perfect image of them. Levin is an unbelievably effective storyteller. His writing is good on the sentence level, but what really stands out is what he manages to create with those sentences in a way that feels so effortless but takes so much skill. He fits everything the book needs into the fewest words it could possibly have, and yet it never feels too dense or too packed full. He does this thing that I have a hard time explaining with his use of a line break or a chapter end, where he gives innocuous sentences more meaning and significance, using them to set a tone that they wouldn't have otherwise set by ending a scene on them and giving you a moment to sit with them. It's a really, really, really great way of building dread without ever feeling corny, but also of showing fun and silly moments as well. More than anything with this book, I think the strength comes comes from the commentary and the empathy that that commentary is based out of. The way this deals with like assault in a relationship, with the way Rosemary feels being so central, and how just on her own she convinces herself that it isn't a big deal. This book isn't trying to preach to you about what is wrong or what is right in this situation. What it wants you to know is how this violation felt to her. And isn't that the most human way to talk about human things? I love it. And then on that thing of Rosemary like convincing herself it isn't a big deal or she's blowing it up too much, that is echoed in the rest of the book, with both herself and other people convincing her not to feel the way she does about things. Her perspective isn't trusted because she's a woman, and then that is exacerbated by her pregnancy. This really made me think about agency in pregnancy, and in my opinion, that is the strongest theme in this book. How the more pregnant she gets, the more people feel they can manipulate her and make choices for her, and the more hysterical she's seen as in her vulnerability. At the end, when she's putting all the pieces together, I think I would have liked a little bit more questioning about whether or not she's jumping to conclusions or being driven mad, but I think that is just because I love and like is the protagonist losing it kind of story. I do appreciate the choice to lead the audience to believe Rosemary when it seems like no one else on the planet has her back. This book is just so intelligent and yet so grounded in everyday lived experience. It is so real and human and empathetic and intimate, while at the same time being an incredible piece of horror fiction with a flawless buildup and a satisfying and almost like satirical payoff. I'm Ira Levin's biggest fan right now, and I'm gonna stay that way by refusing to read the sequel to this, Son of Rosemary, which I think was like universally panned. If you're into horror at all, I have to recommend this. Even if you're into contemporary horror, I think that you will love this book. I think it is hard not to really enjoy this book. It's everything that it needs to be, and somehow more. A 10 out of 10. Fantastic. The next book I'm reading is Delicate Condition by Danielle Valentine. I'm about halfway through. I'm going to talk to you about it later because I feel like I only have bad things to say right now. So I'll see you when I'm done. Bye. Hello. I am here to talk to you about Delicate Condition by Danielle Valentine, a book that pissed me off so bad it has derailed the entire video. This is no longer pregnancy horror. This is now a study of Rosemary's Baby and its shitty retellings. I was hoping that I would have anything redeeming to say about this book, but it just got worse as the book went on. Basically, Delicate Condition is a really terrible retelling of Rosemary's Baby that follows a modern-day woman struggling with infertility. There's some body horror in there. If you want to read this, I would suggest that you read the better source material, but if for some reason you're stuck on reading this book, skip until the next part where I will rant about how miserably this failed, but we're going to start with the summary. So we're introduced to this narrator, Anna. She has this very serious, somber voice to start out, one that tells you that this story goes very wrong for her. She's an actress whose career has recently taken off, living in New York City and going through IVF treatments with her husband, Dex. In the beginning of the book, she has this important appointment at the IVF clinic that she ends up accidentally being an hour late to. She swears that she wrote the appointment time down right, but something has got muddled here. As she's rushing out the door, she's kind of weirded out by this woman standing on the street wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. This woman will show up a couple of times in the next 2 chapters and then literally never again. At the clinic, the egg retrieval goes well, and then she has this kind of weird interaction with a woman in the waiting room who the receptionist calls Mrs. Preacher. The woman recognizes her from her smash hit recent movie, and then once Anna leaves the clinic, she turns around and sees that the woman has followed her out and takes a photo of her. It's honestly like so nothing. It's so whatever. There are some half-baked explanations for this later on, but it doesn't really ever end up being explained coherently what this interaction even meant or what the motivation on Mrs. Preacher's side for it was. Then there's like way too long of Anna reflecting on fame and being an actress. Mostly she talks about how impossible it is to be an aging actress in Hollywood, and I'm not saying that the expectations of women's appearances aren't an issue, but the way this goes on and on about how difficult it is to be 39 years old and not fill your face with Botox, it's just kind of fucking tired. It feels like this very basic and overdone commentary that more than anything focuses on feminism from the perspective of a very wealthy, privileged white woman, and it becomes really hard to care about it, especially when she has nothing to say about like the industry or the systems that are creating these expectations, or how anyone other than herself is impacted by this specific form of misogyny. Also, like, I don't know, she's fucking 39 years old, you know? There are obvious parallels to draw with aging in Hollywood and having a geriatric pregnancy, which is what she's trying to have. But the author doesn't really draw them. Honestly, her age doesn't have all that much to do with how she's treated in her IVF journey or in the medical system with the ensuing pregnancy. And that feels like not just a massive missed opportunity, but a gaping hole in the story, especially when she's experiencing misogyny in medical settings regarding her pregnancy. Now, all of a sudden, being 39 is unimportant. So after a while of this kind of thoughtless and boring preaching where we're introduced to some other characters like Emily, Anna's publicist, or Siobhan, one of her closest friends and kind of like a mentor to her as this older, more famous, more experienced actress, and Talia, Dex's long-term friend and business partner. We then get one of like many interjections that come at the end of every part of this book, and each part is quite small. There are lots of these chapters. This first one is a chapter that is following Io Preacher, that woman that she saw in the IVF clinic. It follows Io being a surrogate and the difficulties that came along with that. This is annoying because this chapter is obviously pretty directly related to the story, and none of the rest of them are. So for quite a while, you'll be reading these interjection chapters and you'll be thinking, trying to piece together how all of these stories and all of these women are going to connect to the main timeline, and then you finally realize that these threads aren't actually going to join together. These chapters really only exist to show us that pregnancy has been difficult for women for centuries, and that there's some sort of cult thing that's also been going on for centuries. Okay, so back with Anna, she's having all these kind of strange mind slip moments. There was that appointment that she was late to, then she left her very important IVF meds out of the fridge, even though she distinctly remembered putting them in there. And then one day she's looking at her Google Calendar to try to really memorize when this egg implantation appointment is so that this mistake doesn't happen again. And as she's looking at it, she watches as the time changes from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Immediately, her thought is this must be one of those online trolls who are always cyberbullying me for being a 39-year-old hag, even though she has just told us a few pages ago that her kind of overbearing publicist Emily is the only other person on the planet with access to her Google Calendar. She doesn't think of that for even 1 second. No, this must be an online troll, for sure. So she looks up her most dedicated harasser and she sees that this woman has been commenting on a post made by Io Preacher on Tumblr. This woman is 60 years old. She's posted the photos of Anna that she took outside the fertility clinic. To what end, I can't remember. I really don't think that there was one. Io Preacher is kind of like posting unhinged satanic panic conspiracy theories. Okay, so Anna finally gets the embryo implanted and she has to wait 2 excruciating weeks to see if it is taken or not. That first night that she comes home, she's alone in bed, waiting for Dex to come home from picking up the dogs, because for some reason, whenever he picks up the dogs, he takes hours to get home, and she feels no curiosity about that. While she's in bed, a woman breaks into her home, climbs into her bed, and cuddles up against her while whispering in this strange, croaky voice, "Baby." Anna, of course, realizes that this isn't Dex and shoots out of bed, and the woman runs out. Anna is, of course, quite frightened after this break-in, and once she learns that the embryo has successfully been implanted, her and Dex decide to go stay in their friend Talia's house in the Hamptons, and they only tell a few people where they've gone. Anna is pregnant for a couple of months before she has a miscarriage, and this scene is something that I will praise the author for. This scene of her having a miscarriage is absolutely viscerally horrific. You can feel the hell that the character is in, and it doesn't shy away from describing any part of it. This is the only point in the book where I felt anything other than boredom and frustration, and it is leagues better than the writing of the other 400 pages. On its own, 5 stars. I gave this book a 1 though. This did not save the rest of it. Of course, this miscarriage is both physically and emotionally devastating. This was a baby that was so deeply wanted. There's also more added on to the scary aspects of the story here, because after the scene in the hospital bathroom where Anna has a miscarriage, she's given an ultrasound by a technician named Meg. And it turns out Meg does not work for the hospital and was literally just some Randy. This, of course, amps up Anna's fear and paranoia about 100,000%. That night, she calls her good old friend Siobhan for support over the miscarriage, and she says all she wants is to have her baby back. Who is surprised? I've just told you what happens in Rosemary's Baby. The next day, Siobhan falls very ill and is comatose. This isn't like out of the blue, unexpected like it is in Rosemary's Baby. Siobhan has been dealing with very aggressive breast cancer for the last few years. The night that Siobhan feels ill, Anna thinks that she feels something moving in her stomach, and she starts to hold on to this desperate hope that maybe she didn't actually miscarry. Not long later, Anna is walking along the beach and she finds a doll of a character that she played in a sitcom when she was in her early 20s. A doll that very few people would have, that no one should have had access to. And it has an X drawn in red across the stomach. So she's convinced that she's being stalked. They up their security. They now have a security guard 24/7. And except somehow one day she hears someone in the bathroom of the house, and it's Talia, the owner of this house. Talia and Anna have a little chat. Talia tells Anna that her publicist, Emily, is being fired from the agency that she works for. And it's only here that Anna puts all of these obvious pieces together that Emily might have something to do with what's happening to her. That Emily is the only other person who had access to her Google Calendar and one of the very few people who knew where she was staying. During this little chat with Talia, they're eating these herb-filled cookies and drinking smoothies, which is just a very simple, on-the-nose, lazy callback to Rosemary's Baby and the tannis root stuff that Minnie gave Rosemary. And also here, when Anna asks about these cookies, Talia says, "I got them from a mutual friend." But like, who would say that? If it was a mutual friend of the two of them, wouldn't you just say the friend's name? It makes no sense to me. This is not how people speak. Anna then becomes convinced that she can feel something kicking inside of her. She goes to buy a fetal heart rate monitor. When she leaves the house, she smells something so delicious, and it turns out to be a dead raccoon in the bottom of the empty swimming pool in the backyard. That will come back. When she asks the lady at the CVS about the fetal heart rate monitor, this woman touches her stomach without permission, but then she also feels the baby kicking. And now Anna can no longer ignore the fact that this is happening. She can no longer say that it's something she's making up. She gets home and Dex is there to congratulate her for her Oscar nomination, which I'm sorry, but that is so stupid and meaningless to the story. But Anna is obviously distracted and she tells Dex what she's feeling in her body. And of course, he thinks that she's losing it because nobody trusts women, right? Which, like, yes, but also there is more to it than that. It is not as simple as it's portrayed. He should believe me. She is in a very fragile and vulnerable state, and denial is famously the first stage of grief. So I don't really see Dex as a bad partner or a man who doesn't believe women for this immediately in the way the book clearly wants me to. Something happens inside her while she's begging Dex to believe her, and she falls to the ground screaming that the baby has broken her rib. They rush her to the hospital where her rib ends up just being bruised, but the doctors confirm that she is still pregnant, that she must have had vanishing twin syndrome. Now Anna is back to being a pregnant woman, and like Rosemary, she is not doing too well. She can't really stomach anything other than those cookies from the mutual friend that her and Talia have. She's in a lot of pain, and she's also seeing and hearing things. Hearing footsteps up in the attic, a talon coming from out of her belly. She wakes up in the night at the bottom of the pool, having maybe eaten that dead raccoon, and then the next day she spits up this inhuman-looking tooth, and then it disappears from her hand. And she thinks to herself, oh my god, somebody's putting something in my food. It's not even a believable sense of paranoia. Girl, you just woke up last night having eaten a dead raccoon, and you're thinking, somebody put a raccoon tooth in my food? Come on. Honestly, it's kind of just like a whole bunch of really disconnected feeling things that are just meant to be scary, but this book doesn't have much in the way of tension building, almost none, actually. It's kind of just like new scene and then new scene and then new scene. And there's also not really anything compelling being done with questioning Anna's perception of reality. It's pretty straightforward what is and is not a hallucination, which means that everything feels pretty stakeless and dull. At one point, she finds a framed photo hidden in a drawer of Talia and Dex and that woman who gave her the ultrasound, and when she sees it, her hair starts falling out in clumps. And for some reason, Dex, this hands-off husband, knows that hair loss is normal in pregnancy, but Anna, the woman who knows literally everything, has researched it all and seems to have even been reading like scientific papers and shit, doesn't know that this is normal. Even I know that. Anna gets a Google alert that IO Preacher has posted something, and it's a video that claims to have found a practicing Satanist stealing babies from women, and it's a photo of Meg, the ultrasound lady, outside of Anna's fertility clinic. She reaches out to Io. They meet up. Somehow her security guard, who's like screening all of her calls and took her phone away, allows this, doesn't ask her anything about it. Io tells her not all that much, really, just that Satanists exist and that she fell victim to them during her surrogacy. She tells Anna that Dr. Hill, Anna's fertility doctor, which, by the way, meaningless reference to Rosemary's Baby, was also Io's doctor, and that she sells the babies to the Satanists. Anna leaves this meeting and she's thinking about how there's still something missing. And for some reason, she's able to just like easily come to the conclusion that it was Cora, Dr. Hill's receptionist, who messed with her Google Calendar. By the way, whoever has been messing with the Google Calendar has also been periodically leaving her messages like, "Are you sure it's dead?" and "You can't trust anyone," and shit like that. She calls Cora, who immediately fesses up. Cora was not, however, trying to protect Anna from Dr. Hill selling babies for Satanist sacrifice. No, Cora was trying to make sure that Anna didn't get pregnant because she's been having an affair with Dex. And Dex had told her that he was going to leave Anna if she couldn't give him a baby after this round of IVF. We also learn, and this is so fucking stupid, that Cora was the one who snuck into Anna's bed in the beginning because she had a key and she thought that Anna was Dex. I'm not fucking with you. Anna confronts Dex and she realizes that his ex-wife, who has been haunting this whole book despite being absolutely unimportant, which is why I didn't mention her, didn't want to give him a baby and he had cheated on her too. She just comes up with this and then that ends up being true. She's like, he sees women as incubators. Then she goes into labor and she calls this birthing center that Siobhan had set her up with before she fell into her coma, and the woman, Olympia, who answers the phone says, "We'll come and get you." But when a car shows up, it's not Olympia or any of the women at the birthing center, it's Cora. And Cora is here to say that she actually wasn't messing with Anna's appointment times and breaking into her home to take her meds out of the fridge because of Dex. She was doing it because of Dr. Hill, because she knows that Dr. Hill has sketchy under-the-table meetings with someone, and Cora listens in and knows that this person has been looking for a specific kind of patient, a patient who is desperate enough not to abort the fetus when it's clear that something is wrong. And then Cora says, "You have to get rid of it. It's a monster." Hold on to that, okay? Then Anna's contractions kick into high gear. It tells us many, many times that she's in excruciating pain, but it does nothing else to communicate that. Very unlike the miscarriage scene. To the point that part of me is starting to think that somebody else wrote that part of the book. Dex is driving her to the hospital when she becomes so angry at him because he pulls out the line, "Don't you think you're being a little unreasonable?" Which is a classic way for a man to invalidate a woman's emotions, but it honestly makes no sense for him to say during this conversation that they're having. She looks at his hands and she sees his wedding ring and she wants him to take it off. And then she watches as the little monster inside of her breaks out and bites his finger. But then, oh my God, it was actually her who did it. And in their scuffle, somebody has knocked the parking brake and the car slides down an icy hill and they get into this horrible accident where Dex is pretty much dead but has a faint pulse. And Anna is still in horrific labor. Then who shows up but Siobhan at the scene of the car accident and 20 other women all standing around all cult-like. Anna passes out, and when she wakes up, she's in an ambulance. She has the baby, and she's sure it'll be a little demon, but it's just a normal baby. She then gets the news that Dex has died, which honestly means nothing for the rest of the book. I think that's the last time that we hear Dex's name, is the announcement of his death, okay? She also learns that Siobhan has died of her cancer, but weirdly, not in New York where she lives, in the same hospital that Anna is in. And then Olympia, the woman from the birthing center, shows up and explains everything in a deeply unsatisfying way. I mean, we don't know Olympia. To have this character show up with all the answers in the final few pages of the book is a pretty lame way to wrap this all up. So basically, Siobhan was a part of a cult of powerful women who did spells to make pregnancy easier for other women. They're not Satanists. They just do pregnancy spells? Okay, this is honestly so silly. They did a fertility spell for her and then she miscarried. So Olympia authorized their cult's ultrasound tech to go and do an ultrasound on her to see if there was anything they could do for the baby. Because apparently this cult of women has the perfect mix of modern medicine and spirituality that they can do that. They can see through medicine if there's anything that they can do spirituality-wise to save a baby from miscarriage. And yet they're keeping that information from the rest of the world. And we are meant to see these women as heroes, as girl bosses, as not incredibly weird and selfish for picking who gets to benefit from their magic powers. And of course, there's no explanation of why these practices are kept so close to their chests. There's no acknowledgement how in doing the practices like this, they are reproducing these systems of oppression that Anna has kind of maybe been trying to comment on. It's also very much doing this thing I feel like I'm always seeing in really shitty contemporary feminist stories that Ursula K. Le Guin warned about however long ago, because I cannot find a source for it, despite the fact that you, I'm sure, have seen it floating around the internet so damn much. It is making a cult of women's knowledge, of their deep irrational wisdom, their instinctive knowledge of nature. It reinforces what women know as subjective, primitive, and inferior to what men know. It was the exact same thing in this fucking stupid book that we read in the book club. I don't even want to talk about it. I don't know why I'm bringing it up. I just have seen this. I keep seeing this. And I'm going to talk about this more. I just find it so embarrassing that this modern feminist book fails so miserably to deal with these issues, particularly in comparison to a book written in 1967 by a fucking man. Anyway, Olympia says that the ultrasound showed that they couldn't have done anything to save the baby, but Siobhan wanted this for Anna so bad that she sacrificed herself by using up all of her powers to give Anna another baby, and that's why she fell into a coma. So apparently babies made through this method are like kind of demonic unless you eat the special cookies with the herbs in them, but Anna had convinced herself that those cookies were from Emily, and Emily was supposed to be her stalker, so she stopped eating them. Emily has nothing to do with anything, by the way. To make the baby not demonic, you have to put someone else's soul in it. So Olympia allows Anna to remember the night that she was in labor when Siobhan showed up, and how Siobhan said, either I'll die and you can put my soul in your baby and she will be happy, healthy, and successful, or the baby might be a little demonic. Maybe I am the friend that's too woke, I can accept that, but that is kind of starting to reek of unaddressed ableism to me. Of course, Anna chooses to take Siobhan's soul into her baby. Olympia also says that the cult pays Dr. Hill for information on desperate women that the medical system ignores, as if those are in short supply, and also as if Anna is even really one of them. Like, yes, absolutely she struggles with infertility, and that is a struggle, but she has been shown to have all of the access to anything that she might need to deal with that. This book has no clue what it's even talking about, and it treats this very privileged main character as if she is desperate in a way that no one else is, as if this struggle is unique to her. Then there's a little epilogue, and this is of a woman many, many years later at an infertility support group, and she runs into Anna, who she instantly describes as an Academy Award-winning actress, which, by the way, she did lose the Oscar that she was nominated for earlier in the book. Why did that even happen? I don't fucking know. And she lost it to an actress with a very obviously racialized name that I looked up and actually exists as a real actress. And I think that we're meant to pity her. I honestly think that this moment is meant to be one where we think to ourselves, poor white lady, suffering because of affirmative action. What the fuck? Anyway, this woman then says that Anna is one of the most beautiful, accomplished, and talented women in the country. And I know that this is just cheaply telling us, look, Anna lived a long, happy, healthy life, and now she's recruiting women for the cult that they might be able to help. But the first description of her being beautiful? What the fuck happened to the thesis in the beginning of this book that you were shoving down my throat that actresses shouldn't have to fit Hollywood's beauty standards? It feels like all of this really lukewarm stuff that the book was saying in the beginning was just negated by this at the end. And also, like, how many questions have been left unanswered here? How many things happened just to happen, to set a creepy tone, to make it more mysterious, but with no reason or explanation for them? Why did Cora say that it was a monster baby? The woman in the baseball cap that was following Anna around in the start, Siobhan had admitted that it was sometimes her, sometimes the other women in the cult. Why? Why? Why would that be the case? Why did this cult have any connection to Dr. Hill at all? Why would they need that? Why the hell did Io Preacher post a photo of Anna at the fertility clinic? What was she doing at the fertility clinic? This part is really simply just to add in this little Satanism misdirect because the book didn't know how to not rip off Rosemary's Baby, but it also obviously didn't know how to rip off Rosemary's Baby. Steam is coming out of my fucking ears still thinking about how this book has a blurb on the front cover that says, "This is the feminist update to Rosemary's Baby we all needed." The what? The what update? Rosemary's Baby is inherently a feminist piece of fiction, and it does that without shouting at you about what it believes, by just having a main character who internally expresses her political opinions. Rosemary's Baby challenges you. It asks things of you. It puts you in this world, and it wants you to understand how the story was even able to get where it does. Delicate Condition is deeply self-conscious about its own feminism. It doesn't really have much depth in understanding what it's talking about, and I think on some levels it knows that. Like, it'll do this thing where it will specify cis in a kind of woke way to acknowledge that trans people exist. But then what it will be talking about is something that trans people can and do also experience. It is exclusionary in the name of being inclusive because it has no idea what it's doing. Everything here feels like a wisp of an idea picked up from probably the internet and then applied to the life of this extremely privileged woman. And then it's depicted as though being a 39-year-old successful, wealthy actress is the hardest thing that anyone might ever go through. Any ounce of feminism in this feminist update is entirely centered around the narrator by the narrator because it's told in first person. It ends up just being so shallow and short-sighted and incoherent. It has ripped all of these plot elements from Rosemary's Baby in the name of being a retelling, but it doesn't really have any understanding of why they worked in that story. And it also didn't really put any effort into making them fit here. Like I said, the Satanism that ends up being nothing, that made sense in Rosemary's Baby, which was written and set in a time of societal change, particularly in regards to religiosity. Here, it's just depicted as like a loony old conspiracy theorist. It makes no sense to be included. It is essential to Rosemary's Baby that her husband betrays her by offering up her body for his gain. Here, the betrayal is honestly just a really run-of-the-mill cheating story that I don't feel anything about because there's been no relationships and dynamics established between Dex and Anna through the whole story. The paranoia of like everyone is in on it and feeling like you're going crazy is ham-fisted in here with this nonsensical note in her Google Calendar that says, "You can't trust anyone." Otherwise, there is nothing meaningfully done with that. There is nothing meaningful about the way that Anna is treated as a pregnant woman. Everything it takes, it does so thoughtlessly. And then the icing on the cake, the writing and editing. This is so fucking poorly written. I flipped to the back when I was in like maybe the first 50 pages, and I saw that this was an adult debut written by a YA author, and I could feel that. I could really feel that. I'm not fucking with you. For every single sentence of dialogue, particularly in the first half of this book, there's an aside where the narrator explains exactly what everyone means and the context to what they're saying. And it will be the most simple to intuit things that you have ever heard. Like, of course, that's what the character meant. I know how to understand an implication. This habit makes the book very long and very slow, and it being arguably a horror or a thriller novel does not help with that pacing somehow. There is no tension in here whatsoever. It's truly just thing happens and then thing happens and then thing happens. And other than that one scene, there is no urgency or fear. You know that she'll be fine, and we'll move on to the next loosely related scene. As a pregnancy horror, you should inherently feel some buildup as she gets more and more pregnant. That's already there. Somehow Valentine manages to squash even that. That should exist at the core of your novel without you even really having to do anything. Any of the reveals that it tries to make shocking, it fails at. It repeatedly follows this pattern where it will be so obvious what's going on, and then Anna will, in a very forced and ineffective way, try to convince you that it's some other conclusion that it makes no sense for her to draw. Like, this woman does not have a concept of Occam's razor. And she won't even write off the very obvious answer. She won't think of it at all. She won't think of it until 50 pages later, and by that point, you're just annoyed to be following this character who is both depicted as very dumb and meant to be intelligent and knowledgeable. Anna is a nothing burger. She's entirely unrelatable as this picture of absolute privilege whose only struggle in her whole life is infertility, which she compares to having end-stage breast cancer multiple times. She lacks any sort of personality or even personhood outside of her desire to be pregnant, a desire that she doesn't explore even once. This is also poorly edited at every level. The sentence structure rarely varies, and it has this quirk where it tries to emphasize things by dramatically repeating them at least once a paragraph. There are too many italicized words meant to be punchy, and it's riddled with obvious spelling and grammar mistakes, ones that any word processor would have picked up on, let alone the human eyes that should have been on this before it was pushed to publication. I honestly think that this book is a fucking embarrassment, and I know that that's cruel to say, but wow, what an absolute mistake to associate yourself with Rosemary's Baby like this. Even just to read that book and think to yourself, I could do better, takes a level of hubris that Danielle Valentine should under no circumstances possess. This is so unbelievably sloppy. It wants to be applauded for its feminism that's so undercooked it goes all the way back right around to being sexism. You literally wrote a more sexist book than the original, which was written in the 60s by a man. That is shameful. This entire endeavor was fucking shameful. So I'm sure that this made a great American Horror Story season. I will not be watching, so thank you. No Ryan Murphy for me. It's a really bold decision to connect yourself so tightly to a foundational piece of work in this genre, and ultimately, it made this book far more frustrating than it would have been otherwise. And it made me wonder, who is this retelling for? Because for people unfamiliar with Rosemary's Baby, there are even more elements for them that make no sense. And for those of us who have just read it like a couple of days ago, this is absolutely enraging in its failure to engage with any of the themes of Rosemary's Baby or express any understanding of what made that book work as well as it did and maintain the longevity that it has. I feel like this being some sort of retelling has alienated all audiences. It has pushed literally everyone away and created a worse book for it. So when this video was supposed to be pregnancy horror, I had a whole stack of books that I was going to choose whichever ones I wanted to read from. And now I think I'm going to read Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. I'm already 50 pages in, and I am reading this because this also calls itself a Rosemary's Baby retelling. And now I think this video is me exploring bad retellings. Sorry, I'm kind of going into this biased a little bit. I don't think of Nat Cassidy as like necessarily a really, really good writer, and I already in my heart feel that you can't make a better Rosemary's Baby. So this is in some ways a bad faith reading, but also at the same time, I don't think anything could be worse than Delicate Condition. So I'm going to be looking for things that this did better as well. That is the theme now. It's now, why do you think you could do better than a fantastic original? That's the video. I'll see you when I'm done with this, and we'll talk about it. Bye. Hello, I am done with Nestlings, and while I thought it was a pretty shitty book, and I'll tell you why that is, I also found it to be a far less infuriating experience to read alongside Rosemary's Baby in this way than I did with Delicate Condition. And I'll also tell you why that is, but first I'm going to get into the summary of Nestlings. Now, this might be a little bit dense, maybe kind of complicated. I've tried to pare it down as much as I can. Somehow nothing happens in this book, and also things relentlessly happen in this book. So if you don't want to hear that, skip to the next part. Nestlings begins with this couple, Anna and Reed, and they are touring the Deptford building. They have won this affordable housing lottery, and they're being offered a top floor apartment in this kind of spooky, very old, glamorous building. I'm sure that sounds familiar to you. There's this really annoying mic drop moment where it reveals that Anna is a wheelchair user, in a way as if that might be the most horrific thing that anyone could ever possibly be. Anna has been using a wheelchair for the last year after she was injured during the childbirth of their only kid, this little baby girl named Charlie. The description of this incident is almost anti-epidural in a kind of very strange way, but that's not something that ever comes up in the book again. Anna wants to live in this apartment very badly, as does Reed, but she tells him that they can't because disabled people can't live in high-rises, which, like, sure, okay. But then, as Reed is telling Vera, the broker, that they aren't going to take it, Anna cuts in at the last minute. It's something like Reed says, "We can't," and then Anna interrupts with, "Wait to live here." It's very like corny, low-budget horror movie writing that will persist throughout this book, and I think is just Nat Cassidy's style. In a choice that I think kind of weakened this book, we come to learn that it's not third-person limited to Anna. It's an omniscient point of view. We get that through Vera's perspective. Once the couple has left, she's in the apartment thinking about how happy she is because it's this couple with a baby. She thinks to herself that Anna's disability is an asset as well, and then she opens up her hand where she is holding a live cockroach that scuttled across the kitchen counter while they were doing the tour, and that she's been holding ever since. And then she eats it. And that is the tone set. To give you a sense of how much this book drags, all of that happens over 10 pages, and they are tall pages too. The font is not huge. In Rosemary's Baby, I think everything that was said in those 10 pages would have been given to us in probably a third of the words. This book is very, very inefficient. The next chapter follows Reed on break from his job as an assistant at a law firm. He's walking around New York City and he's coming up with song lyrics because that is his real dream. And thank God there is only really one instant of song lyrics in this book. However, at this point, it does say, "Writing an homage to one of the greatest lyricists of all time would be a hell of a presumption," which felt like a little bit self-conscious or self-aware. As I will explain later, that is much more relevant to Delicate Condition than it ends up being to this book. Reed is also thinking about the move that they've just finished and how stressful it had been. They had to plan a lot around their old landlord, Frank, this horrible little man, so awful that they paid extra to have their movers come in like the dead of the night so he wouldn't catch them breaking the lease. Reed also really struggled with this move because he had to do all of it, because Anna is a wheelchair user. I think you know already that I'm going to have some issues with how negatively disability is depicted in this story, and no quick forced change of heart in the last few pages is going to make up for how useless Anna is depicted as being. Like, these people hired movers. Anna is still able to like pack fucking boxes. Oh my God. Reed is also thinking about COVID. This is not a COVID book, but it is certainly a book that briefly mentions COVID. COVID killed his mother, who he really loved, and almost killed Anna's mom as well, who everybody fucking hates. And this is my favorite line in the book, where he says, Although, typical of Anna's mother's refusal to ever do what anyone wanted, she shook it off and survived. That rules. That's a great fucking line, especially as the first indication that she is a horrible woman, to be like, damn, everybody wished this piece of shit was dead. I really like it. Reed also thinks about some incident with Anna and a knife a few months into this newfound parenthood and disability that the book will annoyingly allude to probably once a page for the next 60 to 70 pages. That pisses me off because it's that thing that books do to try to keep you interested, where there's this mysterious incident that it thinks you want to know the details of, but then when you finally get to it, the payoff rarely feels satisfying. And in this case, it doesn't, because it's so nothing. Like, it's so exactly what you would expect it to be. What the fuck was all the secrecy for? I also have found that this book keeps secrets from its readers in the most irritating way that I have ever encountered, which is that the third person narration will interrupt itself before finishing a thought that contains information it thinks that you're desperate for. Full on, in the middle of a sentence, it will be cut off with a dash and then a line break. Sometimes the cutoff will be from dialogue, which is almost as annoying, but not quite, but usually it will be from narration. Again, this is third person perspective. It would absolutely still be annoying in first person, but at least it would make sense, right? As like a stream of consciousness thing. No. This is nothing. Absolutely no one does this. It makes no sense and it's so fucking annoying. This quirk was one of my least favorite of Cassidy's writing quirks in this story, to the point where it actually was making me less interested in the secrets that it was keeping from me. There's another quirk that I started noticing around this point, and that's with the characters' inner voices. Anna has her own voice that interrupts her thoughts, and also her mother's. I know that a better writer could have done something cool with this, having those voices merge or something like that, but this was not really left in capable hands at all. The only real differentiator is that Anna speaks to herself in first person and her mom speaks to her in second person. There should be a little bit more to it though. Anna's mother Kathy was, like we've learned, absolutely terrible. So the Kathy voice in Anna's head is exclusively cruel to her, voicing Anna's worst and darkest thoughts put into her head from being raised by a piece of shit mother. Except sometimes, who knows what this is meant to mean, the voice in Anna's head talks to her in second person but is not Kathy. Like here in the narration, it says something else bugged her about the view. What was it? And then her inner voice interrupts with, the drop. You had nightmares last night, remember? Speaking in second person as though it's Kathy, but as Anna speaking to herself, which should be in first person. Instead of ever feeling deliberate or thoughtful, this kind of just makes things feel very incoherent and lazily put together. On their second night in the apartment, Anna can't sleep because she's thinking about her shitty mom, who like really ends up being not that important in this new motherhood story, which is kind of crazy. She's also, like that quote I just read you would suggest, thinking about the view in baby Charlie's room. There's something wrong with the view out into the courtyard and she just can't put her finger on it. So she wakes up Reed and they boink for the first time in a year. They're too busy doing it to hear the noises over the baby monitor of hands banging up against the glass in Charlie's room, the window opening, and Charlie's crying abruptly stopping. After that night, Charlie becomes very fussy whenever she's in the apartment building, so much so that they take her in for a checkup with the pediatrician, but everything seems fine. Anna's physical therapist, Georgia, has been doing home visits with her ever since she gave up on treatment at the facility she was going to. When Georgia is introduced, the first bit of dialogue that she has is unbelievably exaggerated in how southern it reads, and then immediately it tells you she has a bit of southern twang. Like, you wouldn't have been able to tell that, and then nothing else she says for the rest of the book reads as southern literally at all, not even once. Like, Georgia fully does motivational speeches and monologues at Anna, and not once is she southern except for her introduction. She comes for a session one time and she finds a key in the hallway, which she gives to Anna even though it doesn't belong to Anna, and she just like puts it in the key dish. After her session with Georgia, she tries to get some voiceover work done, but she has to create this makeshift sound booth in a closet because her sound booth door was broken during the move, and no matter how many times she asks Reed to pick up the parts from Home Depot, he somehow always manages to forget. While she's in this closet, she hears an adult wailing in the apartment connected to hers, and this book does not do nearly enough to convey desperation or urgency in these wails to justify the next few choices that Anna makes, which are honestly totally incomprehensible. She knocks on the neighbor's door, definitely already weird, like if I heard a neighbor crying, I would probably mind my own business, but then when no one answers, she tries the key that Georgia had found in the hallway, and it opens the door, and she has a very unsettling and sad interaction with the woman in there who's pretty clearly dealing with some postpartum psychosis and is just absolutely broken. She's filthy, one of her breasts is hanging out of her housecoat, she's moving very erratically, she's rambling almost nonsense, and then she pushes past Anna to get to this ornate staircase, which she climbs onto the railing of and almost plummets down, but Anna stops her by grabbing onto her and telling her that as another new mother, she understands. She can hear a baby crying in this woman's apartment. That's why she knows that she's also a mom. She kind of uses this opportunity to tell the woman, i.e. the reader, everything about her struggles in the past year of motherhood and disability. And she details that story of the night with the knife that has been relentlessly teased. And it was, of course, like anyone would expect, just a story of her at her wits' end with the limitations of the wheelchair and the difficulties of the new baby, standing over the baby's crib with a knife. Charlie had been screaming in the middle of the night because of this huge diaper blowout, and Anna ended up getting poop all over her hands before realizing what had happened. And so she went to the kitchen to get some paper towels, and it says in her exhausted stupor, she didn't think to wipe her hands off on her shirt, and so she got baby shit all over her wheels and also all over the floor. Except the rims of a wheelchair don't touch the fucking floor. Did Nat Cassidy even look at a photo of a wheelchair before writing this disabled character? I also struggle to believe that even first-time parents would not, a couple of months in already, have anything to clean up poop with in the fucking nursery. Are you serious? It almost feels like not only does Nat Cassidy himself not have children, but he's also apparently never, ever known anyone else who does. I think the more obvious answer, though, is that he needed his character to go into the kitchen so that she could grab a knife and then be caught by her husband holding it in front of the baby's crib, forever changing how Reed sees her and hanging over both of their heads. But he needed to excuse her choice to go into the kitchen, I think. It's nonsensical. Anna does manage to get the woman down from the railing, but not because she's like really gotten through to her. The woman gets down to tell her that no, she doesn't understand. And then the concierge, this guy that Anna and Reed have nicknamed Mr. Smiley for his unwavering too big grin, shows up and he ushers this woman who he calls Mrs. Jacobs back into her apartment where they can hear the baby crying. He says, "Your baby needs you." And as Mr. Smiley is closing the door, Mrs. Jacobs is trying to tell Anna something about how they're only here at the Deptford because they have babies. That night, Charlie wakes up in the middle of the night screaming bloody murder in a way they've never heard before and freaking everybody out, and they end up getting no sleep. Which means that the next morning, when Georgia comes over and tries to push Anna farther than she wants to go by bringing a walker in, which is like, she's fucking paralyzed. What are you expecting? You're supposed to be a physical therapist? Hello? Anna responds to Georgia's upbeat little monologue by screaming her out of the room. So Georgia decides to walk down that ornamental staircase to kind of exercise her nerves away. But after only a few floors, the staircase stops and becomes this long hallway with no lights. And Georgia is, after many tensionless pages, eaten by a fleshy gargoyle. I think I forgot to mention that the building has some very famous gargoyles all over it. And actually that's related because soon Anna figures out what was wrong with the view into the courtyard from Charlie's room. It's because on the first day she saw gargoyles in there, and now the gargoyles are gone. That same day, Reed snaps at his law firm job because he's overworked and underappreciated, and he has this little moment where he just gets more and more angry and yells at his boss about how shitty he is, and then his boss isn't really reacting to him, so he's just getting bigger and bigger, and finally he stops and the boss is like, "I'm not gonna fire you, but I think we're gonna put you back to hourly wage, and then I think we're gonna reduce your hours, and also you have to start 2 hours earlier in the day at 7 a.m. Of course, effectively forcing him to quit so that he can't claim unemployment. Reed does not tell Anna about this, and he also yet again does not pick up the parts that she needs to fix her sound booth, so she can't really make any money either. When he gets home after quitting his job, Anna tells him that she's pretty sure that they have bed bugs, and that's what's been wrong with Charlie. She's found some bites on Charlie's legs. This is not their first run-in with bed bugs, and to think of dealing with it again, but this time with a baby, is devastating. They clean the whole house, they search everywhere, and they don't find any evidence of bedbugs, so Anna reluctantly allows for Charlie's first birthday party to proceed that weekend. But on one of the nights before the party, in the middle of the night, Anna goes to check in on Charlie, and she sees this human gargoyle face pressed up against Charlie's window, and she immediately goes to leave while Charlie is still in the crib, and then she spends a long time hating herself for that. Reed, of course, thinks that this is just a dream or something to do with sleep deprivation, but Anna secretly knows that she wasn't imagining it. And even if he thought it was real, Reed has other stuff going on, and there is nothing more important to Reed than himself. He keeps meeting this mysterious, glamorous, rich lady in the lobby. There's actually a secret second lobby with a secret second elevator that leads to the more extravagant apartments, and that's where she's always coming from. And Reed wants to fuck her, and I kind of do love that he is unapologetically lusting after this 70-year-old woman. I think that kind of kills. One day she's in the lobby and she's supporting this man who's clearly had way too much to drink, and Reed helps her take him up to her apartment where she gives him a tour. She is Camilla, this like old-timey movie actress and extremely exuberantly wealthy woman, and she hires Reed as her personal assistant, and he does not tell Anna anything about this. While he's at her place, like day partying with her other famous friends from the building, Anna is trying to take Charlie out for a stroll in the building's wooded courtyard. Of course, it all goes to shit, and she ends up lost and disoriented and is then dumped out of her wheelchair. So she places Charlie on the ground so that she can get herself back up into the wheelchair, and then she notices these little spiders everywhere and starts freaking out, and then when she looks up, Charlie is gone. Panic, of course, ensues, and she drags herself off the path and through the wooded area until she finds Charlie in the middle of this clearing that has picnic tables and shit, and she sees that Charlie is eating something. She has something in her mouth, but she's too relieved to have found her baby to really care. And here is a really good example of one of the worst things that this book does to ruin any mystery or tension, and that is having an interjection from a voice in a character's head that just tells you everything. It doesn't let you imagine shit or feel unsettled without understanding everything. So here, Anna is relieved that at least Charlie is having a good time in the courtyard, having found this kind of weird clearing. And then in italics, it goes, or did the clearing open up around her? Well, so now you've ruined it. Why couldn't you have just let me think about it on my own? This happens in this book again and again and again, and it totally destroys anything interesting going on with the mysteries of the Deptford. And then it isn't even treated as like a voice imposed on any character. It is simply just their own inner voice telling them, and mostly us, what's going on. Stupid. It's a really terrible choice, I think. Reed goes to run an errand for Camilla, and he runs into Anna in the lobby after the security guards have helped her find and then get back into her chair, but there isn't really any moment of panic for him here. He easily says, I came home early, and when you weren't upstairs, I came down looking for you. He doesn't even stutter. I think it's trying to show us how good he is at lying to his wife now. That night, he starts Googling involuntary institutionalization, which, like, there's nothing more to ever in the book. I know that it's like he's a selfish guy, and his wife is maybe kind of losing it, but we're meant to trust her because we know that what she's seeing is real. It just doesn't make any sense as like an actual plan, and he doesn't have any thoughts or feelings about it. It's simply just a line where it says that he's Googling around for a bit and then he closes out of the tab. It felt kind of forced to me, especially because it never comes up again. Then we get a little interlude, and this is of a man named Busy who was released from prison and set up with a job at the Deptford. At first, he thought it was going to be a sex work thing, but then we get this look from an outsider's perspective at what's happening with the cabal of elites in the building. We see familiar faces, like the drugged men that Camilla is always hanging around. We see Georgia, we see Camilla herself. Seems like the older people in the building are creatures that like attach their melds onto human melds and then stick a prehensile tongue down their throats to drain their insides. Okay, back with the main story. They're having Charlie's first birthday party, and there's a whole bunch of parent friends over at their place. Now, Anna is the kind of person who wants everybody to be miserable alongside her. If you say something and she can make you feel like shit by making a joke about how her life is worse, she will do it. So she's drinking a beer and she's making everybody deeply uncomfortable and then being like, wow, all these pieces of shit are uncomfortable being around a woman in a wheelchair. She is insufferable. Everyone is oohing and awing at the apartment and they want to go up to the roof, but it's staircase access only. So Anna convinces them to go alone while she stays back to watch the kids. On the roof, Reed sees Camilla and he wants to look cool in front of her, but all of his friends are kind of acting like drunk assholes. And by that, I mean all of the women. And only the women. And he ends up snapping at them and telling them to shut the fuck up and stop acting like tourists, and it's very awkward. I really would have loved to see more of this side of Reed. I do think there's enough seeing this as well later in the book and with his boss, but after he snaps and realizes that he's fucked up and he's trying to like walk it back, it's probably the scene in the book with the most discomfort and tension. In the apartment, Anna is wrangling Charlie off the neck of one of the other babies where she's biting him. The bite leaves this very weird mark that you know is reminiscent of what we saw in that interlude with Busy, with the lips that like Velcro onto what they're feeding from. And Anna also swears that she saw something coming out of Charlie's mouth. Everyone rushes back in and they leave in a hurry. And then Anna and Reed take Charlie straight to the pediatrician, who once again says that everything seems fine with her. Anna gets a call from the mom of the baby who was bit, and she's kind of being an asshole, and she exposes that Reed is working for Camilla, because for some reason on the roof, Reed told everyone, this is my boss Camilla, even though Anna still has no idea. So when they get home from the doctor, they're in this huge fight. Then Camilla shows up at the door and she asks Reed to go on that errand that he never did because he ran into Anna in the lobby and she was all frazzled from this experience in the courtyard, and he needs to blow off steam, so he goes. When he leaves the apartment, who is outside but their old shitty landlord, Frank. Frank calls Reed and his wife all kinds of names and slurs, and Reed punches him in the face. I did read the author's note where Cassidy says that Frank is a reflection of his own landlord, but that didn't really help me from feeling like Frank was more so a little exercise where Cassidy could write all of the most horrible things into a character's perspective about immigrants and black people and gay people and disabled people and Jewish people, because it is so deeply, deeply unimportant, and it almost feels like it's an excuse. Not that I think that Cassidy believes any of the stuff that Frank does, just that I think he kind of had a little bit of fun pretending, because there is no other reason for literally any of this. The concierge shows up and he whispers something to Frank that makes him piss his pants and run away, which I guess works as a de-escalation tactic. When Reed tries to go back inside, the concierge, Mr. Smiley, is like, I think you need to run that errand for Camilla. And Reed obeys. Anna, meanwhile in the apartment, is being attacked by that gargoyle creature that she saw in Charlie's window. She sees it climbing into Charlie's room, so she grabs the baby, and then for some reason in the heat of the moment, she puts Charlie in the sound booth and puts like a weight up against the door, and then she leaves the apartment with the gargoyle in it with a bundle of clothes. And like, this was the right choice. It works. The gargoyle follows her out into the hall where they also run into an old man who's just like, just give me the baby, dear. And Anna ends up being pushed down those stairs and being taken to the hospital. Reed gets a call that she's there. He meets her there. She's super out of it, but she's telling him, Reed, they're vampires. And then he finally thinks to himself, wait, where's the fucking baby? He rushes back to the apartment where he finds Charlie safe where Anna left her, and then Camilla shows up. Camilla takes them up to the roof to talk, and here she kind of just like chucks Charlie over the side of the building. Reed obviously freaks out, kind of loses consciousness, then wakes back up in the apartment building screaming about his baby. But she's fine, and he remembers looking over the side of the building and seeing her casually clinging to the wall like Spider-Man a couple of feet down. Not Spider, like a gargoyle. So Camilla then explains it all. They're essentially a vampire cabal. They're all very old, and they're slowly turning into the human gargoyle things. Those gargoyles are like the oldest members of this little cult. And they have this nursery, which is the floor that Anna and Reed live on, because they've learned that the highest rate of success when transforming new members into vampires is when they're on the cusp of 1 year. And Charlie has taken to it all so well, better than anyone else has in decades. She even found the heart and ate it herself that day in the courtyard. Camilla says to Reed that he can't be a vampire because he's too old, but he can join them. They're like an ecosystem and everybody has their role. And he's like, can you fix my wife? Meaning, can you fix her legs? And Camilla says, yes, of course. And then all of a sudden, truly out of the blue, seeking belonging is like apparently really important to Reed's character. If this has come up, it's maybe come up once, and even then, I really don't think it has. This book just needed him to have some sort of stronger motivation, I guess, but it felt totally random. Like this switch up where he just suddenly accepts the entire thing and is all eager to join would have been less weird if it didn't try to force this other motivation in. He tries to convince Anna to join by waiting for her to be released from the hospital and then surprising her by locking her in the sound booth with the baby monitor and explaining everything while she's in there. And she's like, they obviously lied to him. We're not joining the fucking secret vampire society. So she fights back, and Reed gets very cruel with her very quickly. He's fully withholding Anna's wheelchair from her. He's calling her every name in the book. He is dripping with desperation. He's told her that Charlie is with the building super. They end up physically fighting in the hallway, and Anna leads them to the staircase where she grabs him and then tips backwards so that they both fall down, and he is paralyzed in the fall. She then painstakingly slowly makes her way down the stairs to the super's office in the basement, dragging her wheelchair behind her. It takes hours and hours to do this. But you know from what happened to Georgia that this staircase doesn't end in the basement. It ends in a dark gargoyle hallway, which she finally makes it to. And she realizes here that the gargoyles only move when they're in darkness. You think that she's done for, but then it switches back to Frank's perspective. Frank is humiliated, and he's coming back to the building with a hammer. He manages to lie his way to the service entrance, and he heads up the service stairs, which end in a door that opens to the hallway that Anna is in, filling it with light. She slips past him, and he is closed into the hallway and eaten by the gargoyles. And I'll admit, it's kind of fucking hilarious here. He's not even mad about dying in this way. He's just like, I knew the fucking Jews were up to something. Wait till Tucker Carlson hears about this. I know I was complaining about Cassidy, like, using Frank as an exercise to write bigotry, even though, again, I still don't believe that he thinks the things that Frank does. It's almost worth it for that. That's a great ending to a character. How fucking ridiculous and silly. Anna finally gets the rest of the way down the stairs to the basement, where she goes into the super's office and she sees a flesh wall that's like their mother. This is like the center of the ecosystem. I think that I'm making it sound a little bit more stupid than it is. I wasn't rolling my eyes reading this like I think I might be leading you to do right now. Everyone comes out of the shadows and they tell her to join them. Camilla is holding Charlie and Anna says give her back. The only leverage that she can get is by threatening to hurt the mother, which sends them all into a panic. So they do hand Charlie back to her. But they tell her that it's too late, that the transformation has already taken place. Charlie is not her Charlie anymore. And she can see that. She can see how Charlie screams bloody murder in her mom's arms and giggles with delight when she's handed back to Camilla. So she gives Charlie up. But she's not letting them off that easy. She slices up the flesh wall with this chai symbol that she's been using as a weapon, and it fucks all of them right up. She then escapes the building, and all of the gargoyles fall off of it and turn to dust. And then there's this little epilogue where there's this like really forced character development that I mentioned earlier, where all of a sudden Anna is like, my wheelchair isn't the problem, my wheelchair gives me freedom, which is like, fucking yeah, dude. I don't know. I really hated the way that Cassidy depicted her character and her disability, because through the entire book, all of her anger and misery was directed at her body for being disabled. Never once is it pointed towards like the inaccessibility of the world. No, if she can't access something, if there's a barrier for her, that's the fault of being disabled. It's not even a thing of like, I wish I was making more progress in physio or anything about feeling like she herself has personally failed. It's just simply fuck the universe for making me disabled and therefore physically useless, which it comes back to again and again. This representation written by a man who is not a wheelchair user didn't sit right with me, and no amount of retconning it in the final few pages is going to change how I feel about that. I do think that this couple was meant to be insufferable and bitter and miserable, which is fine, but I couldn't really give less of a fuck about what was going on with them or their relationship. I didn't think that the third-person omniscient narration was a good choice for this story. It would have been harder to write and to get us all of the information, but it would have been a better book if it was limited to Anna. Even if that meant that it needed to rely on these like interludes a little bit more, I really don't feel like I gained anything by having access to Reed's head. It actually kind of feels like it took away from the story and helped in making it way too fucking long and slow. This book was dreadfully boring to me. I really didn't think there was much tension at all. At least with Delicate Condition, I was driven by my hatred for it, but here I felt like I was being lulled to sleep. I found this book so easy to put down and walk away from. The pacing was non-existent. I know I just spent a long time complaining about the way that Delicate Condition handled its depiction of misogyny, and what it did was certainly worse than this book. This book just didn't really earnestly engage with misogyny at all. And of course, not every book has to do that. That isn't a necessity for a good book by any means. But it did feel like there were missed opportunities to explore it here. And I'm sure that's partly because I'm comparing it to the last two books in this video. But, you know, like, this is about new motherhood. It follows a woman trapped at home by her partner who does whatever he wants while she suffers. Even just her being so isolated in this apartment could have been something, but the book does nothing with that. We don't ever feel that isolation. There are points where she'll mention how she's only seen the elevator guy a couple of times, and she's lived in the building for like multiple weeks. But I think that more than wanting to do anything interesting, this book wants to be a horror novel. It plays out like a horror movie would. I'm sure it would be tense if it had all the bells and whistles that a horror movie can have. And that is fine. That's allowed. I actually found that because it takes itself less seriously, its missing pieces were more forgivable than in the last book that clearly thought so highly of itself and then didn't actually do any of the things it was trying to do. Even if the humor does not land for me, which it absolutely didn't in this book, I think I would way rather read a book that was being a little silly and goofing around than one that takes itself so seriously that has nothing to back that up. While I obviously didn't like Nestlings and I didn't think it was a great book, I was way less frustrated by this as a retelling or a work inspired by Rosemary's Baby. And I mean, hugely that's because it doesn't claim to be a feminist update. That was really what brought Delicate Condition down so much for me. Unlike that book, Nestlings never felt like it was trying to do Rosemary's Baby, but better. It actually really only took on like one major element, this infamous old luxurious apartment building in New York, and then it did its own thing with that. And it actually made that element way bigger than it was in the original. It did something totally new and different with it. So no, this was not a book that I enjoyed, but even in all of its faults, I never felt like it was spitting in the face of a book that I did enjoy. I also think that that might be because it seems to have taken a little bit more inspiration from Salem's Lot, which is not a story that I'm familiar with at all. Maybe it's a direct offensive ripoff of that, I would not know. So to wrap this whole thing up, I guess it is pretty much as simple as that. If you're trying to write a retelling of a foundational piece of work, a blueprint in your genre, you can't go in with the mindset that you're going to do it better. Because even if you somehow can do it better, which like most people with that level of hubris is not earned, the ego is still off-putting. If you're going to write a book that openly takes inspiration from another work, I think you can't do that while taking yourself so seriously. And if you do take yourself very seriously, then I think you should stick to taking inspiration from rather than writing a full-on retelling of. This is what I've decided from my sample size of 2, so obviously it's really trustworthy and I think largely generalizable. If you have read a good retelling or a shitty retelling, I want to hear what you think made it work or fail. That is all. Goodbye.